Our church actually studied Ecclesiastes together in our small groups for one entire season. I'm just wondering how many people were in those groups. Okay, great. Well, so there's a sort of a familiarity to the book of Ecclesiastes. And I have to share something with you more personally from where I'm coming from. The book of Ecclesiastes is actually one of my favorite books when I was a child. When people ask me what's your favorite book in the Bible, I usually say like the whole thing, because my favorite part is always the part I'm reading. But back in the day, when I was a teenager, my absolute favorite book in the entire Bible was the book of Ecclesiastes. And there's a particular reason as to why. I don't know if you know what it means to be Generation X. Any Gen Xers here besides myself? Yes, there's a few. Okay, yeah, Gen X, yay. There's a few of us still kicking around, so somewhat alive. Or people are usually on the edge of between Millennial and Gen X. There's that grouping as well. The definition, a lot of different folks have actually had definitions of what it means to be Gen X. But there's one defining reality that Gen Xers lived with. And in my particular reality, it was true. That when we were teenagers and we were in our developmental years, it was during the probably the height of what we call the Cold War. I don't know if you understand what the Cold War was, but it was a time when Russia had a lot of nuclear weapons, and so did the United States. Actually, a lot of people had nuclear weapons, and they still do today. We just don't talk about it as much. But for those people who grew up in Gen X, or my era, one of the defining traits of our generation was that we feared annihilation. I remember, basically this. This is the image that was probably in our minds. And we were always afraid because we had, the United States had a poor working relationship with Russia. They were working on it. Eventually they sorted it out, obviously. But there was always this fear that the World War III would come. And World War III would not be just waged with conventional weapons, but with nuclear weapons. Because that technology had been established at the end of the Second World War. And so, in certain places in the United States, they would actually practice nuclear bomb drills. People actually dug shelters in their backyards. And there was a business in which people had pre-built concrete bunkers that they would lower into their backyard. People were starting to form militias and go out into the woods. Things like this were happening. And for those of us, in Canada, we weren't exactly building bunkers in our backyard. But we were afraid. And I remember, even at night, sometimes I would pray and go, God, I pray that nothing crazy happens and I'll live to see the next day. And you would actually lose sleep over things like this. And in particular, which helped sort of fuel this insanity, was in 1983 there was a movie that was shown across North America and also was distributed into other places of the world, but primarily North America. It was this movie. I don't know if anyone has ever seen this movie or even heard of this movie. The Day After. It was a graphic depiction. It was a mini-series in which they showed what would happen if there was nuclear war. And it was pretty bad. It was so scary that, teenagers watched it. I was 13 years old when it came out, and it was like, what? People's flash were melting. It was like Raiders of the Lost Ark, except like everyone was looking like those people who melted. It was crazy bad. Total destruction. Really frightening. Horror movies have got nothing on this stuff because they're going, this could actually happen. And so all the kids at school, everyone had watched this thing because we didn't have internet we didn't have internet at all. So we were all watching TV. It was our primary mode of learning anything. And so we had all seen this, and we were all scared. We were going, we are going to die. We're the last generation living. That's what we thought in the 80s. And so this Generation X thing was kind of looking at, this is the end of the world. We're not going to make it. We pray to God that nothing crazy happens. And of course we know the flow of history. Through the 90s, a lot of peace was established, a lot of treaties with Russia, between Russia and the United States, and then eventually Russia broke up, and so that threat sort of abated. So one of the things that we look at is, why did Ecclesiastes appeal to a Gen X kid like me in my teens? Well, it is because we were afraid. It was because there is a cycle, and this movie, as many others, captured what we call the zeitgeist, the spirit of the age, the feeling, the malaise. Well, something similar has happened again now with the American election. I mean, we make no bones about it. Even Arnold Schwarzenegger, sent out a message to the President of the United States saying, why don't we switch places so people sleep better? I mean, there are people who are afraid, who are really afraid that this is a possibility. And it might not have had the intensity that it had in the early 80s. But here and now there is a sense of fear over a lot of people. I was in a meeting with a group of pastors, and one of the questions that they asked was, what are you noticing about the people in the city? And again, the one thing that kept on repeating was that people are feeling sad. People are discouraged. People are afraid of what the future might hold. And so we come to the book of Ecclesiastes. I don't know if you heard what Vince read for us from the first chapter, but the theme of this book is pretty clear. Right from verse 1 is meaningless. Everything is meaningless. Life, death, nature, everything, nothing matters. Nothing makes sense. And in light of something like this, like total annihilation, you can see how that's attractive. You can see how a person goes, a young person who's in Gen X, a teenager thinks there's no future, say, yeah, life is meaningless. We don't have a future. The whole world is circular, or life is cyclical. The streams flow into the ocean, but the ocean's never full, and they return back up again. The water cycle that they teach you in grade 4 or whatever. Everything goes around in a circle. Life, death. You go into the ground, you eat by worms, and you fuel other people, and there's the circle of life. The question becomes, well, when does this circle become a little bit of a treadmill? Like a hamster wheel. We're just running and running. It's always going around. You're never getting anywhere. But we're running. Now, you might not be from Gen X and be afraid of nuclear annihilation. You might be a little more hopeful, particularly with John Astuzena's acceptance in our country. That's really great stuff. So there is an aspect. But is there ever an aspect of your life when you just feel that you're just running in circles? That every day's the same? Well, there is an aspect. This is samsara. I don't know if you know samsara. Samsara is the Hindu notion of reincarnation. And some people in the West love they love the exotic mystery of Eastern religion. But This actually comes from a Hindu person, a person who's not necessarily Hindu personally, but they're heavily into meditation and so on, and reincarnation and all this. And they came up with this, that in the circle of life, or the circle of reincarnation, people in the West don't recognize, because they co-opt Eastern ideas, they don't realize that this is a hamster wheel. The people in the East who've been in understanding of reincarnation know that samsara, the circle of reincarnation, is not something that's good. It's hell. Because if you do wrong, you come back as a bug that gets stepped on. If you do well, you might become a human, and if you're super good, which very few people ever get to, you become a Buddha. Or if you remain on earth, you become a Buddha, or you transcend. And you leave. The whole goal of reincarnation is to leave the circle, not to repeat it. It's only in ignorant understandings of this religious model that people think that reincarnation is another chance at life. It's not. You are stuck in a cycle, and you're not human the next time around. You could be something else. Now, that is not a belief system that we have, but there is a similarity to what's happening in Ecclesiastes. Kohelet, the teacher, is saying life is just a big circle. And it just repeats itself, and it has no meaning. Oh, this is in the Bible. This past Thursday, besides the fact that what happened to John and Susanna, it was a very special day. Do you know what day it was? Anyone? February 2nd? Groundhog Day! And therefore one of my favorite movies of all time. Has anyone not seen Groundhog Day? You haven't seen Groundhog Day? Okay. Worthy of watching. I'm just plugging this. They're not going to make any more money from it. But it's pretty old. But the whole concept is this. There's a man who's a real jerk. He's a weatherman, with the snow thing. And he's a reporter, and he goes to report on the groundhog, Punxsutawney Phil. And after he reports, they're stuck in the snowstorm, so they have to stay an extra day. He wakes up, and it's the same day again. And again, and again, and every single day is the same. And the whole movie is about what happens to him as he's stuck in samsara, as he's stuck in this whole Ecclesiastes. If you want to understand the Ecclesiastes, you will watch Groundhog Day. But something else is going to happen. It's actually not bad. There's a redemptive reality to this movie. It's both entertaining and it's a good analogy. But what it is that same cycle. So if you understand that, I asked the question earlier, do you ever feel like you're just repeating things every day? It's the same thing and the same thing, and you're not really getting anywhere. This is how this movie goes. So, this is a beautiful contraption. It's a bike that doesn't go anywhere. Someone decided to put a series of bicycles together in a circle, and apparently it's in some kind of a university or college quad, and they just go down and ride it. They get their stress out. It works. It's all in balance, and so when they ride it, it just goes around in a circle. It's pretty crazy. And let me pause and remind you of who wrote Ecclesiastes. The truth is, we probably do not know exactly who wrote it, except a person. If we notice from the end of chapter 1, it says, "I, the teacher," or the preacher. The Hebrew word is Kohelet. And the title of actually the Ecclesiastes is Kohelet. It means the teacher or the preacher. And Kohelet, if you read the end of chapter 1 there's only one person who that could be in the history of Israel. That person has to be Solomon. the wisest, the smartest, the richest, and he said he had all these things, he's well educated, and he said he put his mind to discover the meaning of life. So here's the thing. We've already talked about a little bit of how to read the Scriptures. Remember we talked about Ezra, and that there's a difference between what is prescriptive, what you should be doing, a command that God gives, and there is descriptive. That is not a command for you to follow, but something for you to help deepen your understanding. So, for example, they'll tell you about Abraham, but they don't tell you how Abraham is just a superhero. They tell a story about Abraham, the father of our faith, as having a lot of flaws. And it's not telling us, oh, you should do exactly what he did, like sell his wife to Pharaoh. That's not prescriptive. That's descriptive. And so in the same way, when we approach something like Kohelet, the book of Ecclesiastes, we have to understand that it is there for us to learn from. It is considered one of the wisdom books in our English understanding of the Bible. It's one of the writings in the Hebrew Bible. We share the same one as Protestants and the Jewish faith in terms of the Old Testament. But when Kohelet is there, the reason why I say that we don't know who exactly the author is, it could be that the real author has taken on the persona or the character of Solomon. And this is how good writers write. They take on their characters. And although they write in the first person, that's not the real author. The real author is a more intelligent person who understands their character, who embodies them so that they can actually tell the story. So it is okay to read it as if Solomon himself wrote it, because that's the intention. But understand that there is actually a more intelligent understanding of person and an author that might be underneath that. So I'm pretty open. If you want to say it's Solomon, it's got to be Solomon, okay, I'm not going to argue with you. But I'm going to say to you, it's likely that it might not be. From my readings, Solomon just lived his life. But there's a reason why he takes the character of Solomon. The question I have to ask, and I asked last time with Ezra, is this a tragedy or a comedy? Does this end well? That's a comedy. Everything comes, there's a lot of trouble, but then it all resolves. Or is it a tragedy that it starts well, but just goes down in the toilet and everything's terrible? The question we ask is, was Solomon's life a tragedy or a comedy? And unreservedly, if you're reading Scripture, Solomon's life is a complete tragedy, a disaster of epic proportions if you're looking at it from a spiritual standpoint. If, however, you're looking at it from an economic standpoint, from a nation-building standpoint, the empire of Solomon is unrivaled, even in Israel. He was the wealthiest of kings. He had other rulers come to visit him. Kind of like maybe, how people are visiting the White House. Whether in this generation or past generations, there was a power in which other rulers would come to listen, to communicate, to hear. Solomon's empire was that empire. He had everything he wanted. He also had 1,000 wives and concubines. So, these are things that... And we're told in Scripture, from a spiritual standpoint, these people led him away from the worship of God to worship idols. So if you're looking merely at economics, if you're merely looking at success, there is no one more successful than Solomon. But if you look at the spiritual dimensions of him, there is no one more tragic, because his father was loved of God, but he turned his heart away from God. And that's why this book exists. This is Solomon's voice, whether it's himself writing or an author behind him. He who has everything says, meaningless, meaningless, utterly meaningless. And we kind of say, wait a minute, you got everything. Are rich people happy? Are powerful people happy? Are people who have everything they ever want in life happy? The answer to that question is no. And that's where the book of Ecclesiastes exists. Because a lot of times we are fooled by a dream that if we just had more money, if we just had more power, if we had more fame and influence, we would be happy. But that is not what makes life fulfilling. And even happiness itself may be a corrupt goal. That is not the meaning of life. I know that probably Vince and Charlotte will love this. Where am I going? What am I doing? What is the meaning of life? This is Snoopy. Wow, that's angst right there. What is the meaning of life? So I want you to go through a particular exercise together with other people. We're going to group you up a little bit. One of my favorite cartoons of all time is Calvin and Hobbes. And here's Calvin saying, if we're just going to die, what's the point of living? And in those words, he's captured Ecclesiastes. He's captured Kohelet, the message. If we are just going to die, and I just love the fact that it's just... Here's the thing. Solomon is coming to us today through Ecclesiastes. And he's saying this to you. Life is meaningless. Don't get, I know, he says, I've done it all. I've, had animals, had, parties. I've experienced it all. And I got to tell you, it's meaningless. But it might not be just Solomon. Solomon's not a real person in our lives. Could be your workmate. Look, life is meaningless, so I'm just going to go snowboard all day. Okay? I'm just working to play. This is Vancouver. We live in Vancouver. Beautiful. We got everything except housing. But aside from that, it's beautiful. But we're surrounded by people at school. We're surrounded by people in our workplace. We're surrounded by people in places where we play who say, I think life is meaningless. Or they're not even this grim. They're not nihilistic. They're not, angst-ridden. But they kind of go, it doesn't matter. It's more back to this. Where am I going? What am I doing? What is the meaning of life? The problem is now, we add to that, who cares? Who cares? It doesn't matter. Like, eat, drink, be merry. Tomorrow we die. Isn't that the way it is? So here's the thing I want you to work on. And this is important that we work on. As believers, as Christians, as salt and light. How do you answer a person who's asking this question? How do you answer Solomon? How do you answer the spirit of our age, our zeitgeist? How do you answer someone when they say, I think life is meaningless? Or, perhaps even more difficult, who cares what the meaning of life is? You make yours, I make mine. Live and let live. How do you answer that person? So there's actually two kind of characters that you're probably dealing with. So what I'm going to ask you to do, we're going to work together. This is working time. I'm going to ask you to gather in groups of, maybe 5 people or so, give or take 1 or 2. And I want you to come up as a group with an answer or an approach. Like what's the next thing you would say? You don't have to resolve. You don't have to come with the meaning of life. Okay, I'm not asking for the meaning of life. 42 or something. But that's a reference. But anyways, so I'd like to ask you, what's your next move? We're just playing chess, so to speak, mental chess. They've played this move, Queen's Pawn or whatever, and they say, look, life is meaningless, or, it doesn't matter. What is your response? What's your immediate response to that? That's what I want to know. So I'm going to ask you just to turn around to the people around you, participate as you're able or would like, and have a conversation. I'll give you about 7 minutes or so. I know it turns to 10, but answer the question. Or answer, and is it because it introduces urgency and priority, and also the aspect of talents. Have you lived your life to the full? I think from a Christian perspective, we've done everything that God has entrusted to us. And then, if they're not, I suppose it's still like, have you lived life to the fullness of the potential that you have? So those are good questions. So we're starting with another question, going deeper in seeking where the other person's at. Any other answers? Maybe from this side. Yes.
So we're thinking about the next step question.
Yep.
Here you are, you're dealt a hand.
Yes.
What do you do next? So just to stay consistent with your Hollywood movie themes.
Okay.
At least my answer was, I thought about the movie Matrix, and then one of the Matrix movies, and one of the answers, they talk about the answer is choice.
Right.
It's you got to look internal. You got to look inside. What is you have an opportunity to make a choice to do something good, to give back to your community, or to be self-centered and self-focused.
Yeah.
And that's your next step. Right? You make a choice on what you want to do.
Yeah.
And only you can answer that question.
Right. So introducing the aspect that they do have a choice, that they have options and they're not locked in, which seems to be where Kohelet was going, because he's fatalistic. He goes, there's only one way. We're all going to the grave, right? And it's like, well, okay, is there another way to look at that? Is it, and I think looking at options and how we live.
One answer. Like every person, when they look inside, they'll have a different answer.
Yeah. There's different things.
They have to make a choice on. What they have to do.
There is a philosophy that says that happiness or contentment is a choice. Something worth considering, see what's right or wrong. I think it has its pitfalls as a anecdotal saying. But, what aspects do we have a choice, right? Because sometimes one of the things that people might struggle with is they feel they don't have one. And how do you create a scenario in which they think they do? Right. That's very good. Any other thoughts or approaches? We've had a few already. Anyone? Yes.
Well, similar, but there was also a response, like for Christians, there's this sense of you can fall into that, running in circles.
Yeah.
And the deeper question is, it depends on who you're talking to. One who believes in heaven and hell, or others who don't.
Yes.
So for Christians, often the message that we grew up with is that the whole point of life is to get saved.
Okay, yeah.
So heaven's the goal.
Right.
If heaven's the goal, then life here doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Right? So what's the point?
Yep.
You're just waiting to see what God anyway.
Yeah.
So I think part of the, maybe the solution and answering to kind of who's asking is how do you see the gospel?
Yes. Yes.
The gospel of faith.
Good point. Yeah. So, just so everyone can hear, it's actually, so a lot of us grew up with an understanding that, or there is a Christian perspective or a Christian-ish perspective that says that the goal in life is actually to get to heaven or to be saved. But that's not the fullness of the gospel as we teach it here, or I don't think that's the fullness of the gospel that Jesus teaches at all, because His is the kingdom of heaven is present. So going back, you were saying that we have to adjust that question or adjust our perspective. What is the gospel? Right? Is that yes?
Well, talk about a lot of these questions. We actually go out.
Oh.
Don't ask, but what do you think?
Hey, can we give you this?
Oh, yeah, sure.
That'd be cool.
That'd be helpful.
So
one thing we do is we have a set of cards, and one of the set of questions is, what do you think is the meaning and purpose? It's really interesting. There's about maybe 8 responses. So it'll be it's to have descendants or something. It's to peace and love, we want to help others or help ourselves or overcome our worries and different things. So it's really interesting to get a glimpse into what people are actually living for. Usually after hearing people out, I would share an analogy. It's sort of what is the modern day parable to connect with people, right? So I just take out my phone and I'm all of us, we usually have, most people have phones, right? And it's interesting because, mine is not the super iPhone 7 or something, but it works, right? The interesting thing about it is on the phone, there's so many different functions. So I could listen to music, I could watch videos, I could play games, I have all these apps on it, right? And all these things to do. But inherently, this phone is designed with a purpose, which is actually to make phone calls and receive phone calls. We don't use it that much, actually, this function. I know it sounds crazy to make a phone call with a phone these days. But actually, and there are times when, actually, I'm trying to make a phone call and the network is down, and I'm this was the inherent purpose it was built for, and it's not even working, right? So it's interesting because I'm if you start thinking about it, it's there's a lot of parallels to our lives as well, where we've lost our inherent purpose, We're busy doing a lot of different things, whether it's, finding the perfect job, the perfect person to be with, or having the perfect family, all these different things. But inherently, it's how do we find our core purpose? And then usually I ask, and I'm well, we can actually try to find out by using the phone and everything and try to figure it ourselves, which most of us do. Or we could read the instruction manual, but I don't think I've known anyone who's read through all the Apple instruction manual. Seriously, everyone just agree, But anyway, so it's interesting because I'm probably the person that knows the phone the best is the creator and designer. Right? So the question remains is well, if we could be connected to our creator and designer, how would that change the way that we see our purpose in life? And personally, I would share it's for me, it's I think our purpose and meaning is that we are made for relationship with our creator and designer. And then the question becomes, well, why is it that we can't have a relationship? How does that inform all my other relationships too if I had a relationship with my designer as well? So that's a really good, I love that question because it launches into a lot of really good conversations. But yes, so those are my thoughts.
Thanks. I don't even have to repeat anything now. Should have done this earlier. I think that's really fantastic. I'm saying one of the things that we might as well talk about a little now. It leads in. The question is, how did Kohelet get to where he got? How did the character of Ecclesiastes, the author of Ecclesiastes, get to where they got? And that is actually what the brilliance of the real author might be. Whether it's God or another human person who's inspired. And there's a reason why this is in the Bible. If you were just a person who's reading the Bible, wow, this is a really down book. This is not inspirational. This is it's got really smart things to say. We write songs about, it's really poetic. But it's pretty down. Meaningless. So I think we've been all asking the right questions. Did Kohelet feel like he had a choice? Did he understand what the gospel was or what God desires? Do we know their history? What led them to that place? Or if they had limited amounts of time, would they live up to their potential? And I think this is a really good response to it in terms of purpose. Did Kohelet have a clear sense of purpose? I think we know the answer to that one a little bit. I think he lost sight of that entirely. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. Any other answers or thoughts on how you would respond to someone who says, life is meaningless? Or, who cares what the meaning of life is? It doesn't matter. Anyone else? Any other groups that we missed? I don't want to miss anyone. Yes? Okay, well, let's put it back here. Well, here's the thing. There's a reason why Kohelet, or Ecclesiastes, is in the Bible. Because we wonder, why such a depressing book? Why such a downer? Because God knows people can be down. God knows we can lose the plot. And we do, often. Kohelet, or in this case Solomon, was buried in building projects. He was also, just immersed in pleasure. He was immersed in science and technology of his time, and in diplomacy, in wealth acquisition. He wanted everything and he got everything, but somewhere along the line, he said, this doesn't mean anything. And I like how, this group, they mentioned that you can be Christian, and many Christians lose the plot. Many Christians don't understand why they're going to church anymore. They can't understand why anyone would worship God and do all this. It's just, I could be golfing, skiing, hiking, doing all these other great things, going to restaurants early like dim sum because you can't do it on Sunday. It's the wrong time of dismissal. Or unless you have a really early service. And so we begin to choose churches and places of worship that are convenient for the rest of our lives. Do you see where this is going? The worship of God, our relationship with God, becomes an aspect of convenience and something we plug in even as believers. Kohelet, Solomon knew who God was. He's the one who built the temple that his father David had prepared for him. He's the one who sacrificed. He's the one who heard God's voice when God said in a dream, "What do you want me to give you?" Anything you want. It's like carte blanche, blank check from God. And here's the thing. I've never heard this preached, but I'm going to preach it today. He asked for the wrong thing. Everyone thinks that he asked for a great thing when he says, "I want wisdom to rule the people." Yeah, sure, he cares for the people. And God says, that's a great answer. But it's not the best answer. What did Jesus want? Let's get back to this table, because we're going to get here. What did Jesus want? He was wise already. Granted, he was God. But what did he want? I think the most important prayer is the one that we prayed this morning, that he taught us. I think the most important prayer that we can pray in life is the prayer that he repeats in the Garden of Gethsemane when his soul is on fire. And he knows that the only way to move this thing forward was for himself to be crucified. There is only one blank check answer when God presents us with that. And this is what discipleship is. This is what it means to be a Christian at the very core, at the very heart. That when God gives us a blank check and says, "Whatever you want," we hand it back to him. Did you get that? Because anything that we fill on that line comes from a place that is imperfect. To pray for anything else other than the very will of God, or to desire anything else than his will in our lives, is a complete and utter disaster. It's a turning of our back from the Creator himself. But it is, I have to admit, the most difficult prayer you will ever pray in your life. Your will be done. We say it every week, but I don't know if we even understand the gravity of it. It is when God says, "I will grant you anything you wish," and you say, "I only want you. I only want you." Isn't that why Jesus came? Isn't that the entire desire of God himself? If you were to ask God, if we were to ask God, "What do you want?" His answer throughout the entire Scriptures has been singular, if you can detect it and understand it. He's saying to us, "I want you. Because I love you. Because I love you." And so when all the riches of the world that Kohelet had, everything he was granted, even this genie kind of wish bottle thing, I think he asked for the wrong thing. He asked for the wrong thing. And the challenge that I face, that you face, that we all face on this earth is this. Do we want all the wrong things? Even in the name of God? Our ambitions. Now, I'm not saying it's wrong to desire things and have goals in life, but what is the underlying very depth of our spiritual bedrock? Is it a desire for God Himself? He who created us, He who loves us. Are we able to respond to Him from the very depths of our heart and say, I want you too? I think you know what I mean when you say to someone, I don't know if you've ever said this, from the very bottom of your heart, I hope you have, that you say to someone, I love you. What is it that you want to hear in return? I'd like some wisdom, please. I'd like to be rich, please, so that I can serve you better. I want to build a bigger church, please. I want to have a secure family. I want my kids to be healthy, wealthy, wise, the whole bit. I'd like to live longer. I want to have a meaningful life. I want to be famous. I want to make beautiful art. No! 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 You know there's only one answer that you actually long for. There's only one answer that you long to hear. But we've already heard it. It's that God is, what we're doing here today in worship, what our hearts are saying, that's why we're here. He's waiting. He's already said something to us. He said to us, I love you. That's what that cross says. That's what this table says. This is what this bread says. This is what this light says. I love you. I love you. I love you. What are we saying back to Him? When's lunch? Hey, this is a good app. I'm tired. So it's about the listening and then the speaking, because what Kohelet got wrong is what we're invited to get right. We're going to visit him again next week. I'm going to dig a little deeper into who he is, and perhaps dig a little deeper into who we are. But sometimes when we come and take this bread or when we see this cross, what is your real response? Someone has said to us, I love you. The triune God has said this. In some scenarios it's very hard for someone to respond with I love you. On the phone, since we're on the phone sort of analogy. You hear people like go, okay, thanks honey, yeah, okay, yeah, me too. Yeah, okay, bye-bye, yeah, yes I know. You know what they're saying on the other end, right? They're saying, I love you. And they, yeah, okay, because you're among friends, right? And you're like, I'm the cool guy, right? I'm not going to say it. Don't make me say it. Don't make me say it, right? That's where we're at. But when we're here together as God's people, even when we're public, with people who don't believe, who are like Kohelet, you see, what brings people to Christ is for someone to say, you have a love in your life that I am astonished by. You live in such a manner, in such romance, with such passion, with such joy. I want that. Who are you talking to on the other end of the phone, right? Who are you talking to in your life, in your prayer? And we say, we are talking to the one who loves us. And let me introduce you. And people have distorted images of who God is. But we are here to answer some of those. One last thing I just want to touch on before we go to communion and invite the children in.